Traveling the Vortex. Side Trip.
Hey Vortex crew, this is Kirk from Kansas City with a report from Chicago TARDIS. We had a memorable Thanksgiving weekend. My son and I drove up to Chicago from Kansas City. My daughter, who's in law school, was flying in to meet us from the East Coast. And we landed actually in Thursday and had a lovely Thanksgiving dinner with my daughter's boyfriend's family. They had a very nice time. And then came down Friday morning and began Chicago TARDIS. I was a little surprised. As you guys know, I'm one of the planners, have been one of the planners of Planet Comic-Con in the past. So we, bring 70,000 people or so to our convention center. I was kind of surprised by the more low-key tone of Chicago TARDIS. I knew it would be a smaller show, but Friday especially was pretty quiet. There were people there, but it was not as busy as Saturday at the show. There were also simply one main programming room, two smaller programming rooms, a video conference area, a dealer room, which was just in a medium-sized ballroom, and really had two main vendors. About half of the room was taken up with the Alien Entertainment booth, the Doctor Who shop people, who had a wide variety of merchandise, and most of the other half of the room was the Big Finish booth, which you guys would have really enjoyed, I'm sure. Just table after table covered with the audio CDs of the Big Finish recordings. Probably every recording they've ever made was there with multiple copies. There were some other vendors set up in there, and one comic book artist, Christopher Jones, who does some Doctor Who comics. But it would say obviously a much smaller experience than Planet Comic-Con. The team at Chicago TARDIS has been doing it for 18 years, so they really know what they're doing, and they had a great crew of volunteers who kept things moving along. But Friday and then even Saturday, they had a whole queuing system set up for registration that I really never saw full in terms of the line. When we got in and began on Friday, I started with a 10 a.m. panel in their main exhibit room. But as we were heading actually down from our hotel room, Patrick had forgot his badge, and so we got booted back out at the door to have his credentials. So we went back to the elevator to go up to our room, and ran as the elevator doors opened. We almost ran headlong into Peter Davison as he came off of the elevator. So that happened a few different times where, in this case, Patrick, we got on the elevator, I'm like, that was Peter Davison. He's like, oh, I didn't even notice. Later on, it's like we passed by Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, and I said, that was the Sixth Doctor and Perry. He's like, oh, I didn't even see them. So we came up with a code word, rutabaga, so that anytime we were walking along, if there was a celebrity around that he would recognize, I just said rutabaga, and then he would know to look around. And that then worked later on when we were moving around. I would say rutabaga, and he'd be like, what? Oh, and find the people. The first panel we did, though, was an orientation. It was kind of nice that they were really taking the time for attendees to go through what was going to be happening at the convention. Unfortunately, it got a little bit dull. It did kind of turn into reading the website, and since I'd already looked at their website, I didn't need the full details. But one of their challenges this year is they were not able to book a New Who guest, and there was a statement issued by the convention organizer just really apologizing to the fans about not having a New Who guest able to attend. They apparently worked with 3 different people trying to get somebody booked and just couldn't pull together a deal. And they made a point of going over that information at that orientation session. But I went ahead and headed out after a portion of that and went over to check out the game room and the video room, and then also the dealer room. And I know that it's tough to book Doctor Who, new Who guests. I know that from working on Planet Comic-Con. So my heart goes out to them in terms of the challenges right now in getting that done. The 11 a.m. panel that we attended was Peter Davison and Janet Fielding. That was being moderated by Stephen Shapansky of Radio Free Skaro podcast. That actual panel audio is already available on the RFS feed, so if people want to check that out. It was a fun panel. Davison and Fielding obviously have worked together for a long time, done a lot of convention appearances, so they have some real chemistry when they're on the stage, taking people's questions and kind of ribbing each other as well. That was fun. I'd never seen either of those performers in person before. I did think it was odd in the main exhibit room, or rather the main panel room, that the way that they handle seating, reserved seating for the kind of VIP upper ticket levels, is that every single seat in the front, like 7 or 8 rows, was numbered with the person's name on it. So you had assigned seating for every single person with a VIP level ticket. What that meant for most panels where there weren't VIP people were that the first 8 rows of seats were almost completely empty, and that was very strange. I don't know that that's necessarily the best way for them to handle that. That especially since it's very rare. It was very rare when I was there to see the room full. In fact, the only one. I'll talk about the only full panel here in a little bit. We got out a little bit that day and grabbed some lunch and stuff, came back in time for the 2 p.m. panel with Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred. The nice thing about this show was the guest list included the 3 doctors, Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Sophie Aldred was there, Janet Fielding was there, and just a real nice... Oh, and Nicola Bryant, who I mentioned before, was there. And also Lisa Greenwood from the Big Finish audios was there as well. When I arrived, I got down to the room just a few minutes late. Sylvester was already out in the audience, running around up and down the aisles with the microphone and looking really sharp, sporting a new goatee. He kind of looked like he was set up to play the master. It was very interesting. I guess this is for what he was doing. He said has been recording, filming Sense8. But he was there in the audience. Eventually he went back up to the stage, and it was then Sophie's turn to take the microphone and run around in the audience. So she was just picking up his normal high energy sort of a thing, and she was really throwing people off by coming up right in front of them in front of their seats and sitting down next to them. I'm not sure, but from where I was sitting, she might have been sitting on somebody's lap at some point. That was a lot of fun, a great panel. The next panel that I did was at 5 p.m., and that was a companions panel with Sophie, Janet Fielding, Nicola Bryant, and Lisa Greenwood talking about feminism in Doctor Who. That was moderated by Lynn Thomas of the Verity podcast. That was a nice panel. There was a lot of mutual admiration among the ladies. They all definitely agreed that Doctor Who is doing a better and better job of representing feminism and women in general, having more parity in roles, and are all very enthusiastic about Jodie Whittaker coming on as the new Doctor, with some reservations I think that a lot of us have of wanting to make sure that that's handled and presented in a way that's fair and equitable. They definitely, felt like and made a big point that when a man is cast as the Doctor, that man is not supposed to represent every single male in the world, and that we shouldn't expect to hold Jodie Whittaker to that same standard either. So we shouldn't expect her to represent all women simply because she's an actor taking on a role. At 6 p.m. they had their opening ceremonies on Friday evening, and so that was started with a little bit more website reading, because again they were trying to make sure they had more people in attendance for this, and then they concluded by bringing all of the guests from the event out onto stage at once. So that included, as I said, the 3 doctors, the companions, also Nicholas Briggs, Fraser Hines, who I didn't mention before, Jason High Ellery, who's the founder of Big Finish, author Robert Smith, and comic book creators Tony Lee and Christopher Jones. And that was the wrap-up for that evening. That went till 7 p.m. There were some social things going on, kind of a costume thing, but Patrick and I went back to the room to rest and play some video games, and started again on Saturday. Saturday morning I went down early. They were doing a screening in one of the smaller programming rooms of the Five-ish Doctors reboot. And with Davis in there, I thought there was a chance he might show up for it. Unfortunately, the screening was kind of botched in that when I arrived, they were fiddling with the projector trying to get it to run, and as they got going, the projector then was playing the audio, but when the video was playing, there was a big error message over the center of the screen, and then after a moment or so, it would go to a blue screen, and then cycle back around after a moment to the video, but with the error message, and then back to blue screen, and back to error message, and so on. So after 5 or 6 or 8 minutes of that going on, and nobody seeming to try to fix it, I just decided to give up on that panel, and there was no sign of Peter Davison anyway at that point. A little bit later, did a Fraser Hines panel, again somebody who I had not seen in person before. He was very fun. I mean, just hilarious, and talking about the Troughton era. I thought that was a terrific panel. The next panel I did was the Companions panel featuring Sophie Aldred and Lisa Greenwood. They very much had a good time together talking about stuff. Sophie and Sylvester are my favorite TARDIS team, so it's fun to see much more of her. And then, in fact, speaking of them, then the next thing I did was get their autographs, Sophie and Sylvester. I decided after the investment of going to Chicago and paying for the tickets and all the things I were doing, it's even though I'm not typically an autograph hound, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and pay for their autographs. And so I had a copy of a 1990 edition of Doctor Who magazine that has them on the cover in a picture from Curse of Fenric, standing in front of the church with the vicar, and had each of them sign that. Got a chance to speak with them both briefly, and so Sophie signed. I got to tell her that just like she and Sylvester, my birthday is also August 20th. All three of us share the birthday and are birthday buddies, and that was fun. As Sylvester signed my magazine, he made a point of telling me, he said, I've signed this to Kirk outside of a Kirk, because Kirk is the Scottish word for church, and that was a Scottish church on the cover. So that was fun. I told him that I really liked his look with the goatee. He said he was just copying my look, and I assured him that, yes, I am quite the trendsetter. So we had a nice little chuckle. Patrick got to meet them as well, and that was a fun experience. It's kind of strange how they do the autographs and photographs, though, at Chicago TARDIS. They actually have us all go to a separate queuing room and sit in seats and wait to be called up in batches. It allows them to get the different types of VIP ticket people first and send them over. But then once you're in small batches, you go line up in a queue out in a hallway, and then you're sent into the photograph room, which is private, not visible to anybody, in groups of 5. So it's kind of interesting that at Chicago TARDIS there was never an opportunity where the guests were just sitting at tables and available for fans to kind of come up and meet at the table, other than paying for an autograph and getting to go in the little private room, or happen to bump into one of the guests as they walked through the hallway. I want to talk a little bit more about that when I get to the evening, Saturday evening. But it was fun. It was nice to get their autographs and to have that kind of up close and personal time. Even though Sylvester has been to Planet Comic-Con before, that was an interesting experience during his time there, and so I never really got a chance to socialize much with him, much to my regret that weekend, and I made up for it now. The 5 p.m. panel was really the highlight of the convention in terms of programming. It was 3 doctors on stage together. So Davison, Baker, and McCoy, and they have had a lot of time together. They talked a lot about the Five-ish Doctors reboot. They have a lot of chemistry together and a lot of kind of shtick that they do with each other. The topic came up of Peter Davison's comments about having some regrets about boys not having a role model in a male doctor. He made a point that his comments were somewhat taken out of context, but Colin Baker challenged him on it a little bit, and it didn't actually get testy, although there was some polite debate back and forth between the two of them, while Sylvester McCoy sat off to the side, running his fists in circles, going, "Fight, fight, 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 fight." And that brought down the house. That was a huge, hilarious moment. That panel was terrific. It was the only panel, like I said, that was filled up, except for some empty spots up in those reserved seat rows. It was standing room only, and I was standing along one wall, which was nice. I actually got fairly close and had an unobstructed view of the stage. So I probably had my best view of the show. After that panel, Patrick and I headed back to the room and ended up piling onto a fairly full elevator. And as the elevator door was about to close, a lady came on, and then a smaller person who was kind of up in front of somebody larger in front of me, and I didn't really see who was up there. But suddenly the conversation with the lady who came on started with the other person, and it was clear she was complimenting Sylvester McCoy on having a great panel. And so Sylvester McCoy rode our elevator up, and it turned out that because of where we were going to go up to a party on a higher level floor, we were like the last people left on the elevator with him, because he was on a very high floor. So as people got off the elevator, we had more and more opportunity, and I got to congratulate him on the panel as well, and just again got another nice moment or two with Sylvester McCoy. So that was a highlight for me. As I said, Patrick and I went up to a room party, and it's apparently some of the long-term attendees host this every year. They put together some turkey and dressing and other snacks and stuff, and kind of do a Thanksgiving-themed party in the room. It was a little bit interesting because a number of the people who come up are year after year attendees who know each other, and Patrick and I didn't. There were a few other folks that came up who were first-timers, but it was just an odd dynamic. We're Doctor Who geeks, and so everybody seemed to be fairly introverted. So it wasn't a whole lot of chit-chat networking opportunities. I did speak with a cosplayer who, when I asked him how he got into Doctor Who, said, well, the day that they announced that David Tennant was going to be the next Doctor, two different people sent him emails with photos of David Tennant and said, "Oh, so this is what you're doing with your time now." And then I looked at him again, and I'm like, oh yeah, if his hair was darker, he would be the spitting image of David Tennant. And sure enough, he was had gotten into Doctor Who because he's a David Tennant lookalike, and had actually won the grand prize in the costume contest one year as the 10th Doctor wearing the orange spacesuit costume. So I had a nice chat with him, but eventually we took a break to go down to the costume contest, and then the party resumed after the masquerade. But I came back up to the room party. Patrick went back to our room, and they basically put on some Red Dwarf episodes, and everybody just sat around quietly watching TV. And I'm like, well, I can watch TV back in my own room, or play games or do things with Patrick. So I actually left and went back downstairs and went to the lobby and checked things out. But in between those two times was the masquerade, the costume contest, and they had actually a surprisingly few number of costumes that were shown on stage, only about 15 or so. I'd seen many more great costumes out in the hallways, but apparently those people didn't participate in the costume masquerade for one reason or another. They had the people who participated were really great. The highlight was a Alpha Centauri costume, which you may have seen circulating on social media. A terrific, just super fun costume. The guy that they had moderating the panel was dressed as a classic series master, And he was very funny, and people in the costume contest were doing, some of them were doing skits or musical bits or whatever. The Alpha Centauri cosplayer challenged the master to a dance off, to the chicken dance, which was just uproarious. And Alpha Centauri ended up winning Best of Show. They also brought up, as they presented awards later on, a lot of the hallway awards from the show, and that included just tons of small children in adorable Doctor Who costumes. A lot of great stuff there. But while the judges were doing their judging, they conducted a game show, much in the spirit of the great Traveling the Vortex quiz show. In this case, they were doing Match Game, and so it worked just like the 1970s game show. We had a panel of celebrities up on the stage, and they brought up two people from the audience to try to match fill-in-the-blank questions that were designed to be risque. It had one of the convention organizers was up on stage, a man whose name is eluding me at the moment, but also Tony Lee and Christopher Jones, the comic book creators, were up there. And I actually got selected to be a contestant in the second round of game. So I guess I'm turning out to be a professional Doctor Who convention game show contestant. Much like you guys had me on I earned my spot in your game show in Wichita at Time Eddy. I actually won my round, and then the joke had been going around based on Tony Lee, had been doing a lot about Adric being dead and how great it was that Adric was being dead, and one of my questions then just perfectly lined up where the great funny answer was Adric, and then I matched all three of the people on the panel and won my round. We were ready to be done with that, but Tony Lee insisted that we had to have the two winners face off for a grand finale winner. So I got to stay on stage while the previous winner came up, and we ended up taking it to a tie. So I tied for grand prize winner of Match Game at Chicago TARDIS. After the room party and checking in briefly on the karaoke party that they had going on in the gaming area, I retired for the night. I came back down Sunday morning for the Verity podcast recording. Lynn Thomas and Erica Ensign from Verity Podcast were both there, along with Erica's husband, Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Skaro. And that episode actually is already on the Verity podcast feed if you want to check that out. They did a lot of fun games, this or that, Cuddle, Marry, or Ignore, and some other games that they do. And that was a nice, fun panel. I listened to Verity and Radio Free Skaro. I also listened to Lazy Doctor Who, the podcast that Erica and Steven do together as they watch all of the episodes of Doctor Who in order from the beginning, and then do a nice, intimate kind of recap and discussion of them afterwards. That's actually my favorite of the three podcasts, and it comes out irregularly, but I highly recommend Lazy Doctor Who. I got the chance afterwards to shake their hands, meet Lynn and Erica and Steven, and tell them how much I enjoy listening to their podcasts. At that point, though, even though it was still Sunday morning, we had a very long drive back to Kansas City. So we wrapped up and checked out of the hotel and started heading towards home after a very memorable weekend. My takeaway from Chicago TARDIS is that there are some limitations. They seem to maybe to have attendance down a little bit this year because of no new series guest. I didn't like the way they did the seating for the VIP people because it left so many empty seats. I didn't like that there wasn't like public table time to go up and see the celebrities and have a little bit more of an extended conversation with them without maybe dropping quite so much money. I was also surprised that there was not more active social media going on during the show. I was tweeting some using the Chicago TARDIS hashtag and put a few things on Facebook, and as I looked through the activity, it seemed like I was one of the most active people actually at the show, maybe other than Stephen Shapansky. There, of course, was the lack of New Who, which they really tried but couldn't deal with, and then the video issues were disappointing as well. But on the plus side, it's a really intimate setting. It's got a slower, more relaxed vibe to a show, you do get a chance to see the panel performers, the celebrities do panels in different configurations on all 3 days. So if you're only able to attend one day, you're going to be able to see the celebrities do something on stage. There's also autograph and photo time with them each of the days. So there's lots of opportunity for one-day attendees. Also, the show clearly has a lot of long-time attendees. When they talked during when they were doing the opening ceremonies, they asked how many people were first-year attendees, and had a fair number of hands go up in the audience. And then they asked how many people had been all 18 years, and it was really surprising that there were nearly as many people in the audience who had been to Chicago TARDIS every year for all 18 years as were there the first year this year. And also, the merchandise was really very reasonably priced. I'm not a Big Finish person, so I really wasn't looking to pick up Big Finish CDs. But I was picking up $10 and $15, $20 T-shirts, all of the other kind of merch, the books and the branded items and things were not high priced. They were very normal sort of priced, or sometimes even a little bit bargain priced. So there was some cool stuff to get there. It was well worth spending a little bit of time in the vendor room to get some cool stuff. It's a type of show that if you're in the Chicago area, it's definitely worth going for one day. If you're going to travel from further away, I think it's going to be dependent upon how much you really want to see those guests, and maybe whether you've got a good low-cost opportunity. I will say that in what I saw, there wasn't a lot of LobbyCon going on at Chicago TARDIS this year. I don't know if that's typical or not. So there were always a few people kind of sitting out in the hotel lobby, but it was not a real happening place. I also found that the part of this is my fault because I'm not necessarily the most extroverted, strike up a conversation with a stranger person but I just didn't find that there was a lot of opportunity to really make new friends there. I would recommend definitely, if you don't already have friends who are attending, you'll want to go with friends so that you have some good social opportunities and can share things with them at the time. But anyway, that's my story for Chicago TARDIS 2017. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the Vortex. Thanks.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.